Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Los Banos Today show. And tonight we have a very special guest for you. This is a pre-recorded video. This is not the morning show. We're here with Virginia Gonzalez. Good afternoon. Good evening, Virginia. Welcome back.
Thank you for having
to the show again. It's wonderful to have you. And you might have seen our previous show. And if not, go ahead and go back through our videos and check that one out. You will see Virginia and I in that. I think that's a 3-part series that we did. And tonight, Virginia is back with us again. And we're going to be talking about suicide prevention. And Virginia will be educating us a little bit more on the topic of suicide. How do I know if my child, or a friend of mine is suicidal? How do I even know? How do I tell? What are the signs?
Right. Yeah, so often when we talk about suicide, it can mean so many different things. And oftentimes we can't even tell if somebody is suicidal, because how would we know? And so oftentimes there's different even levels of where people are at when we think of, or when we speak of somebody being suicidal. So for example, something I think that's really important to keep in mind is that sometimes some people would technically be considered into the category of like being suicidal when they have, at the very least, thoughts of no longer wanting to live.
Right.
So oftentimes, I guess I could use myself as an example. When I was younger, there was a lot of times in my life that things would happen and I would just be like, I just don't want to be here anymore. Like, I'm tired of this. And so I would just have these thoughts of like no longer wanting to be here. But in my mind, I didn't see that as suicidal. So if somebody was to ever ask me if I was suicidal, I would be like, no, I'm not trying to do that. But I had those thoughts that went very deeply of no longer wanting to be here. Right. And that's one thing that we have learned is actually the very beginning of becoming suicidal. Oftentimes that very lowest level of becoming suicidal or having these type of thoughts, ideation, is just not wanting to be alive anymore. And oftentimes a lot of us could even say at some point of our lives we've had that, maybe for a second, maybe a minute, maybe a day,
going through a frustrating moment.
Yes, or even sometimes an embarrassing moment.
Yeah.
But sometimes that's the beginning of that small seed of suicidality that begins to grow.
Yeah.
And so oftentimes I like to see that as the very first warning sign of something could grow here. Possibly
something bigger that is yet to come.
Yes. And so when we talk about somebody being suicidal, oftentimes we could start there. We could start at the people that at this moment don't really want to live.
Yeah.
Don't look forward to going to sleep and waking up in the morning.
Right. And I just want to cut in there for a moment because I'm going back to our previous video where we were talking about depression.
Yes.
And I kind of see the two kind of hand in hand with depression leading into this kind of.
Yes, that's right. Oftentimes people that are going through depressed moments, whether it's something that's diagnosed or not, it's something that often can lead to this.
Right.
It's something that's very, it's very together. It's hard to pull apart. It doesn't mean that if you have one, you have the other, but oftentimes you do see them
could be a sign.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about suicidal ideation, oftentimes it's those thoughts. It's those thoughts of just thinking like, I just don't want to be here.
Yeah.
Or I just wish this could be over.
Yeah.
Then the next step that we see that oftentimes that could grow into is having some type of intentions now. So now it could be, I don't want to be here, and if only I could get that gun in the other room and shoot myself. Or it could be you're driving and it's like, if only, what if I just jump or drive off the bridge? Or what if I just don't press the brakes? Or it could be walking on a bridge and saying, what if I just jump?
Right.
So it's now starting to actually have some intention,
Right.
and wondering about it and thinking, what if I did this? What if I let myself just walk into traffic? And then that's when you start seeing that it's starting to elevate, that there's some
Right.
type of intentions of thinking like, maybe I could do this, maybe that. And then I would say the next step would be when you actually start planning.
Okay.
And when you actually start actively thinking about it more.
Okay.
And one can say at that stage, that oftentimes it could be somebody that does not own a weapon will purchase one. Maybe they're going to be thinking about the method, and they will start gaining access to that method. And it starts becoming a plan. Sometimes it could
it goes from up here, just the thought, and you begin to bring it into reality.
Right. It starts becoming a tangible thing
Right.
that you can actually do, and it becomes more accessible. Oftentimes people will have a date or start thinking about it, like, when would I want to do this if I did? Some people will associate it to maybe a holiday or an important day, a birthday
Or something.
Some people will it will be depending on situational things just going on around them. But then that's that last stage where people start really thinking about it, where it's not just, I don't want to live here, it's
Right.
I don't live here and I'm planning to do something I'm trying to do something about it.
Right.
So those are usually the levels of intensity that you see. So when you see somebody, oftentimes, like you could see, like depending on what they're saying or what's going on, like what level it is. And obviously the higher the level of intensity, the more dangerous it is,
Right.
the more at risk they are of actually, committing suicide.
Right. Thinking about all that there is in life, and there's so much beauty and so many places to go and so much to do. And, we're so hopeful, and we look towards the future. And I know myself, I make goals, I aspire to do things and to travel. Why would someone want to commit suicide? What would cause somebody to just, I don't know, get a 360 and flip and start thinking the other way?
Yeah, so it is often common for us to think of like all the positive things that we can do in life, and sometimes that makes it hard to really understand why somebody would be that's in that state
Right.
of wanting to commit suicide. Like, why would they want to do that? And so oftentimes the core of everything, everybody has their different situations. We can't say this is the one reason why somebody
Right.
would do this, but oftentimes we do see patterns, or we see just their root causes oftentimes that just kind of underline a lot of these situations. And oftentimes we see there's a hopelessness that's going on in their life. So hopelessness could be that they really are going through some type of situation in their life that at that moment they cannot imagine life getting any better.
Right.
So let's say if they're having some rough situations, problems with their family. In that moment, they really believe that things will not improve. And when maybe somebody on the outside that is not feeling suicidal can see like, oh, well, no, there's possibilities, there's these things that could happen. But when you're in that moment of really just feeling like you might just want to end it all, oftentimes in those moments, you're blocked from being able to see a change.
Right.
You can't see something else, which is often that type of hopelessness in some type of area
Right.
in their life, which is oftentimes an area that's causing them to hurt a lot. Oftentimes, you hear people talk about how the pain is so unbearable and they can't imagine it going away.
Right.
And sometimes I think we could all relate to heartbreaks,
Right.
hard moments we've been
Right.
through where it feels like this will never stop.
Right.
The worst pain ever. And
Yeah.
then, time goes by and it does get better.
Yeah.
But oftentimes in those moments,
In that moment.
you're living that this is the worst pain
Yes.
in the world. oftentimes it is really
at that
bad.
moment.
Yeah, and it's hard to function. It's hard to go to work. It's hard to go to school. It's hard to learn for children that are feeling this. It's hard for them to learn.
Right.
They're sitting in class and they're thinking how life is just not good, or just the world is bad, and then the teacher's trying to teach them something, but their mind in that moment, they can't think about a future. They can't think about graduating. They can't think about going to college. In that moment, they're just feeling that pain, and they're thinking, this pain hurts and it's probably never gonna go away, and they think the only out is just to basically just end it all.
That's hard to think of, and I mean, we all have those moments, but we see that struggle, and like you said, in that moment, sometimes it's difficult, and that leads us to who's more, at risk of being suicidal.
Yeah, so oftentimes when we see people that are at risk, we do see some patterns. Of course, it's not something that if you have one of these risk factors, it means you will automatically become suicidal. No, it's something that it's very different for every person, but something that we do often see is if there's suicide happening in your family, if you have a family history of it, oftentimes that raises the risk of one becoming suicidal, or having an attempt, or having the thoughts. Oftentimes we might even see that in the schools, of not just in your family. So
are you saying in our ancestors, going back in our genealogy, my grandfather, if my grandfather was suicidal, does that mean I could be suicidal?
Oftentimes,
is that what that means?
Yes, that's something that a lot of research has shown.
Really?
And so a lot of times we really encourage looking back at your family history.
Wow.
And to see what do your parents have tendencies of. Let's say being depression, anxiety. We've even seen PTSD.
Wow.
Sometimes passing by from generation to generation to people that never witnessed the traumatic incidents. Those symptoms, those feelings get passed down.
Wow.
So oftentimes we do see that with suicidal ideation or attempts.
Oh man.
So it's really important sometimes to learn about your family history.
Wow.
I mean, it could be a lot of things. Some people believe there's certain things that could be in your genes, and then others more believe it's more of the way you are raised and what you're around. So oftentimes if one has parents or caregivers that are often using language of hopelessness, they hear their parents always say, I just don't want to be here anymore. Oftentimes, it raises the probability that the children are going to start saying these things.
Right.
It's learned behavior. So I think there's different reasons that this could be the case, but we have noticed that that people that have had suicidal ideation in their family, that it raises the risks of them also becoming suicidal.
So what can help a child or a friend from committing suicide? I mean, what help is out there for them, especially in that moment? I mean, is what else is there, and how can people use that?
Yeah, so often definitely having that social support is really big. So, and that means sometimes just having a friend, having somebody to talk to. So saying that, giving the example that if you suspect one of your friends may be suicidal, oftentimes being that one friend that could listen, that could be that social support, that could make a huge difference in many people. Also having the opportunity to talk about goals. So a lot of times we don't we just kind of bypass goals, especially sometimes with children and youth. We just assume that they know they're going to have to graduate and go to college and do something with their life. But a lot of times kids could get really stuck in not knowing what they're going to do, or they don't know much about
right.
Or maybe they don't know their own talents.
Right.
So oftentimes, I know we talked about this too with the bullying, how one of the things that prevents is having talents and interests.
Yeah.
So it kind of ties into this too, because having interests, having talents, having a sense of what your purpose might be in life can make a huge difference.
Especially in your self-worth. I mean, and that we go back to self-esteem and building that up. And so,
yeah. So oftentimes when it's suicidal, you lack purpose. You believe the world might be better without you. You think that whatever you could do is replaceable. And those are very common phrases that people that just don't want to live anymore say or feel, or sometimes just think, and they may not verbalize it. But oftentimes having some type of goal, so even like saying like, oh, I see that you're really good in creating art or a sport, or you have good people skills, and starting to brainstorm with people of like, wow, you're really good with this. Maybe you would be good working for customer service, or maybe you would be really good becoming a reporter, or like just really seeing like what are people's interests, what can they